joined now by Robert Halfon, who is the Conservative chair of the Education Select Committee and MP for Harlow, North London neck of the woods. Robert, at a time of national crisis, should a Prime Minister not be able to rely on the total undivided loyalty of all of his MPs?
I regard myself as a loyal Conservative. I do support the Prime Minister. I very rarely vote or abstain against government motions. I've gone through the lobbies supporting some very difficult motions because I do believe that it is my duty to be a team player. But there are occasions where issues are very important that you feel that you have to either abstain from a vote or vote with the against the government, and it's not something I enjoy doing. But in terms of, you're obviously referring to the food debate today,
yeah.
It is likely that I will vote for the Labour motion or abstain, depending on what the government say.
That's on the school meals?
On the school meals, yes.
But there's also Lisa Nandy's Fair One Nation deal, basically saying that if you have to be shut down, whether you be in Liverpool, Manchester or Harlow, London, then it should still be the furlough rules. You're not going to support that, I assume.
Well, that motion is predominantly about Tier 3.
Yeah.
I actually think that the government has done although I disagree with them on the combating child food hunger issue, I do think that they have poured hundreds of billions of pounds into supporting areas. My own area of Harlow has had over 130 million. The government are working on Tier 2 help, as is reported in the newspapers today. And I actually believe that they should be supported. And I think they're trying to do the right thing, given the constraints on the economy and the constraints on taxpayer funding.
Your school meal issue, Marcus Rashford is the one who got it into all of the headlines, and Labour want it to go all the way through until Easter. You certainly want it to go through half term. Why should all taxpayers pay for all kids to have free school meals? Is there not a degree of parental responsibility there as well?
Of course, there is parental responsibility, but because of COVID, and we just talked about government decisions, because decisions the government has sadly had to make in terms of lockdowns and restrictions, many people are struggling. Thousands of people have lost their jobs. The Office for Budget Responsibility say unemployment could reach go up by 13%, meaning that over 360,000 families will face food insecurity. So if these decisions are being made by government, if people are losing their jobs through no fault of their own, it must be the responsibility of government to try and help these families, especially when families are facing child food hunger. And don't forget, the government spent hundreds of millions on the Eat Out to Help scheme only in the summer. The government has a furlough scheme, which is in essence a taxpayer benefit to help people who are in work. This is a program for children temporarily. I'm not arguing that it should be forever, but temporarily to help during the coronavirus crisis.
One of your biggest issues, though, is the general notion of inequality, and schools are a vital example of that. Why don't you go the whole hog and say this should go on forever and a day like Labour?
Because what I don't think it is the answer for it to go on forever. But what I do think the government should do is sit down with Marcus Rashford and the task force that he set up, which includes a lot of major food companies in the UK, and work out a genuine long-term plan with a budget to combat food hunger. For example, they could institute a program of holiday activity programs during school holidays so that kids have activities to do, plus get fed at the same time. They could expand the breakfast clubs, fund those across many more disadvantaged schools. We know that if kids eat breakfast, it improves their GCSE rate, it improves their education attainment by up to 2 months. They should work with businesses so that businesses provide matched funding for the voucher schemes that the government have to deal with food poverty. But what we need is just a long-term plan to deal with the hunger, improve attainment, and it will actually be a cost benefit to the government in the long run. And there is money already for this because the government raised over £300 million through the Coca-Cola stroke sugar tax.
Yeah.
That money is disproportionately unfair on those on lower incomes. So why not redistribute that £300 million to combat child food hunger across the country?
Let's talk a little bit about COVID as well in terms of schools. It's widely reported today that cases reported in nearly half of the country's secondary schools. COVID cases are now being reported, and lots of children being sent home. I had a text message from a mum just a moment ago saying one sent home for 7 days, one sent home for 2 days. These children's lives may not be at risk, but their education is being clearly disrupted more and more by COVID, which you didn't expect.
I did. Well, I knew that there would be some schools that have to send bubbles home, so-called bubbles or years home because of COVID outbreaks. But what I've always known is, according to all the scientific evidence, that thank goodness children are at very low risk from this awful disease. Whatever happens, we have to keep our children learning again and keep our schools open as far as possible. And where they're not learning at school, they should be learning at home. And the government have issued a directive about ensuring that there is quality learning. Many teachers and many schools have done an incredible job in trying to make sure kids learn at home. But the fact is, over 2 million children over the past 6 months didn't learn anything hardly at all. And what needs to be clear is there needs to be a plan from the government in terms of how this directive is going to work, what support they're going to give to schools to make sure that those kids who don't have the internet or laptops get them. And Ofsted should play a role working with the schools, not as candid friends, not as inspectors, but as candid friends, to try and ensure that whatever happens, kids learn if they are sent home because of COVID.
Are the Department for Education being a bit delusional at the moment, Robert? Because they put word out that class sizes are getting smaller, things are getting slightly better in schools, and the Times Education Supplement said, no, they're not. That's simply not true.
Well, we had the Minister for Schools in our Education Select Committee yesterday. He's promised that a plan B will be, they're working on it and that it will be on its way. It's vital that we see that because we have to make sure we keep our children learning. And the other issue as well, of course, is to make sure that schools have enough testing kits and that these tests can be done very quickly. The testing is improving, but it would be a lot better, and probably schools would not need to partially close if they had the testing kits required and the testing results came much sooner.
Yeah, but I repeat my point about the department itself. I mean, Nick Gibb, we've both known for a long time, honourable man, but the department may or may not be dysfunctional. I mean, you've been pressing for these plans way back in February, March, whether it's laptops or whether it's class sizes or what have you. And now you're saying we need another, there's a plan B. Somebody needs to kick what's it, don't they, Robert?
Well, we try to scrutinise government and what the work goes on in the department in our committee. And Nick Gibb did say that there is a new laptop scheme that is being delivered, that more laptops will be delivered to children. But you're absolutely right. We need, in my view, a quite urgent announcement over the next few weeks, if not before, as what is going to happen in terms of how this online learning at home is going to work, how the test, the guarantee that there'll be more testing in schools, and also in terms of what happens if exams, the preparation for exams are disrupted next year.
Final point, what did you make of Kemi Badenoch's speech on critical race theory and Black Lives Matter having no place in schools? We should not be teaching our children about these matters. Was she right?
I think she was specifically talking about white privilege, and I have some sympathy for that. I want a level playing field for everyone. I come from a Jewish background. I hate racism of any kind, racism, anti-Semitism, or whatever it may be. And I want a ladder of opportunity, a level playing field for every child. But to talk about white privilege, as we had a witness to our committee, Professor Matthew Goodwin, who said, well, when you talk about white privilege, you also are you really saying that white constituents who live in poor housing, have a disadvantage in terms of educational attainment, suffer from food, hunger, poverty issues, that they are part of white privilege, and that stokes resentment and doesn't really solve a lot of problems. So yes, let's make sure we stop racism. Let's have equality of opportunity, but let's not use terms like white privilege that I think are insulting to many good people up and down the land.
And I think, as you said, just to get it on the record again, last time we spoke, some of those in schools who are suffering the greatest deprivation and hardest times and poorest achievements are white working class boys.
But white working class boys and girls, I mean, girls do slightly better,
Yeah.
but at every stage of the education system, white working class boys and girls from free school meal backgrounds do worse than most other ethnic groups. And that's why, again, if you start talking about white privilege, you're insulting those people who are already struggling and are left behind in the education system.
Robert Halfon, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.